from. We will take questions at the end when all three of them are done, because the questions will probably be related to each other. But without further ado, go for it.
Hi, my name's Carmen. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. I'm super excited. So my paper is entitled Saving Gays, Burying Digital Labor, Queer Female Fandom, Culture Industries, and the Politics of Representation. So the Bury Your Gays movement, it was the coordinated demand from queer female fandom to media producers for better media representation following the deaths of many queer female television characters in the first half of 2016. So both news and entertainment media and academic responses to the Bury Your Gays movement have located queer female fans' coordinated efforts as resistive, and they position queer female fandom as a force that media industries must reckon with. And this is part of a larger shift in the relationship between audiences and culture industries, wherein, like, through social media, producers and fans interact in unprecedented ways. So with the rise of social TV, the traditional separation of fan activity and industry is breaking down, and it's converging in very new ways. Yet, despite this convergence between audience and industry, current academic accounts of queer female fandom's resistive activity lack a critical account of capital. While it is indeed true that culture industries do not have complete control over the media objects they produce, and that fans are exerting influence in new ways, it is also true that on these online platforms, fans construct themselves as objects for culture industries to exploit for profit. So what I want to argue today is that when we're making claims about what constitutes queer female resistance, it is particularly important to account for these embedded capitalist structures. So this is because queer female fandom's call for positive fictional queer representation stems from real-world concerns about queer socio-political well-being. Queer women have a real-world stake in on-screen deaths. As a historically oppressed minority, the death of queer women on screen is not just them taking issue with an overused plot device, but is an issue at the heart of their very lived experience, their very ability to be seen as worthy of social space and material resources in the real world. And this is what George Gerbner terms symbolic annihilation, wherein representation in the fictional world signifies social existence in the real world. So, for queer women, figurative death and literal death are inextricably linked. And protesting and organizing against the long-standing tradition of TV shows depicting homosexuality negatively is a major part of queer female fan activity. So as Sarah Gwynolyn Jones writes in her work on Xena Warrior Princess fandom, queer female fandom is a politically inflected space where women negotiate and subvert the real world, heteronormative ways their identities have been historically inscribed. Since that time, Ing and Russo write that queer female fans have been leaders in positioning themselves as a critical counterpublic, with an investment in shifting the dominant terms of media representation. So it's this particular aspect, the call for more and better mainstream representation, being situated as critical and resistant to homogenizing and marginalizing social forces. That's what I want to critique today. So my argument is that living in this time that's characterized by the capture of information for monetary gain, our discussions of queer female fandom's resistive potential requires a critical account of the ways that industry structures, silos, and directs that same potential. And I'll further suggest that the resistive potential of queer female fans lies not in their ability to court media producers, but in their ability to organize as a collective that has the capacity to come together and call for deeper, more meaningful social change. So historically, queer women portrayed on television have not been given happy storylines. So much so that queer media websites Autostraddle and LGBT Fans Deserve Better maintain running lists of dead lesbian and bisexual characters in television history, dating back to 1976. So though there is this long history, the Bury Your Gays concept reemerged with a vengeance in mid-2016 after the deaths of many queer female characters on popular television shows in the first half of the year. Most notably the death of character Lexa on the science fiction TV show The 100. So The 100 had drawn a devoted fan base directly related to its decision to make lead character Clark bisexual and have her fall in love with Earthbound Commander Lexa. As Miles McNutt notes, this decision drew a significant LGBTQ audience to the series, with devoted fan activity on social media platforms dedicated to shipping the two characters as Clexa. So after Lexa died, immediately after having sex, I might add, for the first time with Clark, McNutt writes that the 100 became a site for intense fan protest. This protesting was measurably effective. Showrunner Jason Rothenberg lost thousands of followers on Twitter, and the following episode had the lowest ratings in the show's history. And these largely queer female fans got hashtag LGBT fans deserve better to trend for hours during the show's time slot. As a result of this fan-driven protest, the term barrier gaze became a well-recognized media trope and started circulating heavily on cultural media outlets such as The Washington Post, Wired, AV Club, Hollywood Reporter, and Vox. So in 2017, peer-reviewed media and fan studies journal Transformative Works and Cultures published a special issue entitled Queer Female Fandom. And you can see the cover here features Lexa, and she's surrounded by kind of various emojis and the Tumblr logo. So in relation to the 100, the editors, Ing and Russo, write that queer female fandom constitutes a powerful platform for literal campaigns of resistance to heteronormative structures. So let's cut to October of the same year, 2016, and the release of San Junipero on Netflix. So written by Charlie Brooker, San Junipero is an episode of the series Black Mirror. The episode tells the story of female lead characters Yorkie and Kelly falling in love with one another in the virtual reality of San Junipero. The show's climax hinges on whether Yorkie and Kelly will permanently upload their consciousnesses to San Junipero and be together forever. And in the end, spoilers, Kelly chooses to be with Yorkie forever, and the episode ends with the two of them driving off in a convertible together to Belinda Carlisle's Heaven is a Place on Earth. It's like really not subtle, but also awesome. So the episode has been celebrated in the media as a subversion of the barrier gaze trope in relation to the characters ending up literally in a place beyond traditional notions of death. But I want to say, if San Junipero is the endgame of queer female fandom's resistance to normative oppressive structures, then we have sorely missed our mark. So in their focus on positive mainstream representation as queer female resistance, news media and entertainment media and academic responses to the barrier gaze movement imagine social media as a kind of democratic space and forget the capitalist structure and power imbalances that underpin these sites. For example, McNutt suggests that audiences should use social media to express their concerns regarding representation and are somehow able to resist the efforts that would limit their contributions in these spaces to being used as marketing campaigns. But, as Tiziana Terranova argues, all social media activity, as much as it might be enjoyable and productive, is also free labor, which becomes for culture industries, quote, the creation of monetary value out of knowledge, culture, and affect, end quote. This is also what Jodi Deem terms communicative capitalism. She writes, the very practices of media that we enjoy, the practices that connect us to others and ostensibly end our alienation, appropriate and reassemble our longings into new forms of exploitation and control. So therefore, while mainstream representation is a primary means by which queer women become increasingly politically visible and socially normalized, that same mainstream representation is controlled by culture industries whose primary focus is not the material well-being of queer women, but capital accumulation. So as a result, social progress, in this case the possibility of queer female life, becomes inextricable from the mandates of corporate profit. So interestingly, this argument is echoed by Russo in an earlier piece where she wrote on queer mainstream representation more generally. And she writes that the intensification of fan engagement online also means that media industries increasingly absorb this information. So as queer female fans become more and more visible as an easily identifiable group who can make calls for more and better mainstream representation, they also become more visible industrially as a commodity for capitalist exploitation. After all, it is only with the call from queer female fandom to stop burying gays that Charlie Brooker, a straight, white, affluent man, wins Emmys, and Netflix, a multinational corporation owned by another straight, white, and affluent man, makes millions for not burying gays. So I want to repeat that calls for more and better mainstream representation stem from fears of symbolic annihilation, wherein fictional queer existence in popular media representation inform material possibilities of life for real queer women. When I came out to my oh-so-normative family, that they had already been exposed to queer stories on television and in movies and novels laid the very groundwork for their acceptance. So when I watched San Junipero for the first time, I, like so many queer female fans of queer female television, cried my damn eyes out. As Lena Waithe said in her Emmy acceptance speech, I felt seen. Feeling seen as a queer woman who is worthy of life is a very powerful feeling. It is a feeling that extends beyond the screen to the everyday lives of queer women. To varying degrees of privilege for different people under this queer umbrella, it is directly related to having unfettered access to housing, to adequate social and medical resources, the ability to get a job, to feel safe from harassment and abuse on campuses and in workplaces. This is what is at stake when we talk about queer representation. So as a result, the push for mainstream representation by queer female fandom is both the exploitation of queer women for industrial profit, but it is also the very politics of queer survival. The critical issue is when we are silent about the exploitative and deeply reductionist capitalist structures driving our social justice efforts. The critical issue is when we mistake political survival for political thriving. This does not mean that queer female fandom's resistive potential is drained of all its power. What the Barrier Gays movement demonstrates is that queer female fandom has proven itself an active and productive force. But I do want to argue that the most important resistive power of queer female fandom is not in its ability to influence mainstream fictional representations, but in its ability to organize as a collective with shared goals. Because this is what is threatening to capitalism and to, like, neoliberalism, which depends on increasingly intensive forms of individualization. As questions of industry fall to the wayside in our discussions of queer female representation, the resistive potential of queer female fandom becomes limited to a kind of cultural phenomenon, as though this is somehow separate from economic and political queer reality. This not only misunderstands the issue of symbolic annihilation, but also limits our understanding of the nature of resistance in the digital age. And in doing so, tends to, as John Fiske once wrote, naturalize the capitalist system so that it appears to be the only one possible. But much like unions, we can organize to demand better and better justice for historically marginalized and disenfranchised peoples. But that effort can only begin when San Junipero is not the end game of queer resistance. San Junipero should be only a beginning. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was great.
Thanks.
I think. Hello? Okay. Up next, we have Patricia Ciccone. She is currently a PhD student in cinema and media studies at USC. She's also a researcher for MediaQueer.ca, an online catalog for LGBTQ Canadian film history. She curates moving image events in Montreal and Los Angeles and performs as Patty Boo Boo in the feminist hip-hop art collective Donzel. I think...
All right. Hi, everybody. I changed my title slightly from the one in the booklet, so sorry. All right. A decade ago, members of a community calling itself Society of Sensationalists started to share links of seemingly unrelated content. The content they shared ranged from how-to videos to promotional clips of beauty parlors. Although disparate in subject matter, all shared items had been tagged by members of the community for their ability to trigger pleasurable physical reaction, tingles, among those who considered themselves sensitive to the phenomenon. While these exchanges started on the message board, the Society of Sensationalists has grown into a significant, large-scale online community and is now known as Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response ASMR Community. Moving away from found footage that was collected and circulated on the early days of the community, video producers with global visibility now tailor their content directly to receptive fans that follow their video with passions. I'm going to show a short clip for everyone who doesn't know what ASMR is. So this is a video from ASMR artist GB ASMR. Sorry about that. I don't know if we don't have sound, but.
I'll come and fix that.
All right.
I think if I unplug this.
I mean, I think you can figure out. She is rubbing on by Honoro speaker and whispering to the speaker. Yeah. Okay, it's better when it's done than when it's not. this goes on for 23 minutes. I'm not dismissing it. I'm not dismissing it. All right. So in this brief presentation, I want to accomplish 3 things. First, I want to sketch out a brief history of the group in order to demonstrate how its condition of publicness changed over the years. Secondly, I want to discuss the particular implication of using YouTube, as I believe that it translates from a particular transformation of the group between a digital public and an algorithmic public. And thirdly and lastly, I want to discuss some of the implication of these arguments on the logics of findability and representation of sensations online. Hence, I'm not debating whether ASMR tingles are sensation or not, or even under what type of sensation they might fall, but rather I'm looking at the network structures that accompany these encounters. I'm tracing ASMR video as it grows in popularity in order to highlight the shift in the social potential of sensations into the logic of neoliberal self-care. In the first years of the group, the textual Yahoo community format allowed sensationalists to present themselves. The goal of the Society of Sensationalists, as they themselves described on the Yahoo group, was finding people who experience the same sensation. All we have right now are questions, and we need answer. We need help, not in the sense that we want to solve or cure this sensation, but rather instead to learn what causes this and whatever else may be concerning to us. For that matter, in multiple posts in the Yahoo community, people are seen describing themselves, offering their histories, almost as symptoms for others to use in a common diagnostic. From curing age, favorite sports, first time they remember feeling that tingly sensation. Then these messages often end with members of the community sharing a list of disparate video online that others of the community might like, both as a present, but also to see if others react in the same way. But as the community expanded, the focus on individuals sharing the discovery shifted to specific individual producing videos for others to enjoy. Already by 2010, a dozen of producers were making their own video and using YouTube as their distribution center. By that point, as Jocelyn Anderson suggests in her brilliant reading of the ASMR community, and I quote, "The ASMR community as a public resolves less around defining ASMR, how ASMR occurs than the internet-enabled possibility of sharing that experience." ASMR videos follow the proliferation of a particular style of confessional video that became associated with YouTube, and aided by the increase of affordable video and audio capturing and editing software. YouTube, as both a popular archive and a site of exchange, became ASMR's context of publicness, where a communicative object can count in a public way. If the Society of Sensationalists was based on the serendipitous encounter with sensation online, these new producers produced something totally different. Rather than sharing their fortuitous finding, community members took the backseat and were now searching for them. This reversal created a particular language around sensations created by ASMR, one that tended more towards directedness and discursiveness. Keywords were added to the video to describe the sorts of tingle that the producers were hoping to present and how they would do so. And this particular one is hear and sound, whispering. YouTube's context of publicness, its social-facing visual infrastructure, I argue, had a lot to do with this transformation of the genre toward an algorithmic public. As Miriam Ensign suggests, modern publics require stylistic strategies and modes of narration to absorb viewer into textually constructed position of general subjectivity that also serve the historical convergence of social and economic objectives. That was a quote. And as systems of representation became more and more complex, the fantasy they socially and publicly construct becomes more complex too. YouTube as a platform presents its own narrative strategy and its own ideal public, and both of these are also tainted by the inherent money-driven endeavor of the platform. As our interaction online becomes synonymous with our interaction with the screen, our monologue and comment section, our word selections, and our singular decision to share a video or not, we are asked to rethink and reconceptualize the social as an interface. At stake in the algorithmic public, however, are the hidden infrastructural conduits that guide our interaction. Chris Owen argues in Never Alone Except for Now that these new sites of encounter produce a very specific type of interaction, one that fosters encounter as an unreciprocal act, one that eliminates the give and take that liberal discourses of digital public often assume. But these sorts of network encounters are not just different because they are online. Rather, they are different because their logic is driven not by the desire to produce publics, but by the generation of population. It is for this matter that the mediated sensation of ASMR videos become an ethnographic problem, one that necessitates an understanding of a whole ecology to define its inner workings. Producing a new group of people through strategies similar to demographics and market strategies, YouTube shaped the ASMR genre towards a certain form of network individualism, towards the singularity of the discerning consumer. Algorithmic publics are great examples of this tension between the space and interplay between subject and publics, and the network technology that are neoliberalism's icon, mechanism, and medium. In a media ecology where encounters is generated publicly through networks of screen and constant data surveillance, is there a place left for the political potential of sensation? Here the works of Sophia Noble and Sarah T. Roberts, both critical information scholars, come to mind. How does the invisible algorithmic structure in Noble's case and the invisible content curation and moderation in Roberts' case of giant platforms like YouTube shape our individual and subjective understanding of the content it presents to us? And how do they blind us to their operation and mechanism? Going over a century of classification theory that helped to negate the idea that words could ever be used in a neutral way, Noble and Roberts' work help us better understand how certain elements become reoccurring in the genre since it's moved to YouTube, by looking at the biases of commercial social infrastructure as well as the policies that shape them. For Noble, the web's inherent connection to larger dominant economic structure means that every search is always already imbued by biases that serve the driving logic of capitalism, a logic that excludes bodies that are not welcome within that realm. Here, racialized, queer, disabled bodies. Under algorithmic logic, pleasurable sensation can only be provided in an encounter with a specific type of body. Whiteness is made neutral and is not normalized as a potential side of desirable sensation within the ASMR community, while queerness and body of color or differently able bodies are always already coded as such. This translates in search terms that highly codified differences, but also in differences that are ultimately performed to fit niches that it is meant to fill. Roberts' work on human laborers that are in charge of making the ethical decision to delete posts on social media allows us to better understand the reasons why the comment section of white passing ASMR star are totally moderated. Sexual behaviors on male ASMR star comments are allowed, or why racialized ASMR video often get deleted for sexuality, even if they do not contain anything remotely sexual. Our work allows us to understand how certain systems allow for clear articulation of what form of sensations become permissible on the platform and what bodies are marked as always already too much under capitalism. The invisible policies and algorithms that become YouTube's, these two scholars argue, work in shaping our encounter online in ways that are unbeknownst to us, in ways that take away our agency. But what else is so different from the text-dominant platform, Yahoo community, to the visual dominant platform of YouTube that would reshape or totally transform the group's mission of finding answers and connecting with each other's? A quick glance at Olivia Kisper's ASMR channel can give us a better understanding of how sensations are tailored in this new infrastructure. Kisper's channel, far from being one of the most popular creators, kind of represent perfectly the dominant aesthetic and demographic of video produced for the community. Kisper herself is a white passing of Eastern European descent, appears to be in her 20s, and shares on her information page her affinity for westernized meditation and relaxation techniques. Divided in different categories, each offering a single genre of close encounters. These videos created by Kisper all seem to have different function. One of the most popular playlists on our channel is one entitled Airplay, and it has over 40 different videos. Most of these videos recreate the experience of going to the hairdresser, either for hair treatment, which means that Kisper in a whispery voice presents all the products that she's about to use on the viewers during her virtual shampooing, or present the viewer with 15 minutes from 15 to 45 minutes of amplified airbrushing sound. Another type of hair play on Kisper's channel is a subgenre of couples role play. Lying in bed, Kispers pretends to play in the ear of the viewer by reaching behind the camera while whispering sweet nothings. In another playlist, Medical Examination, Kisper role plays a diverse amount of medical professionals, from a caring nurse to an anesthesiologist doctor who is about to cure your anxiety. The loose narrative structures of these videos never really change between playlists, and the setting, aside from some mindfulness videos where Kisper edits herself into beaches using a simple editing program, are always domestic and non-descriptive. Using a binaural microphone, Kispers amplifies the sounds in every videos and put much emphasizes of the noise that would trigger ASMR reaction. In a particular spa and skin care video, she taps her long nails onto every bottle that she pretends to use, creating little triggers at every step. In the comments section, fans of her work exchange about what moment triggered them and what sensation they felt and what they would like to hear in her next video. Kisper, who replies to almost every comment, often complies with these demands within a few weeks, modeling her production around the desires of the members of the community. These highlight perfectly the transformation of sensation to self-care under neoliberalism, and more precisely in network society. Reimagining the modes of distribution, circulation, and dissemination of sensation, virtual networks such as YouTube, as sites of encounter and relation, make non-reciprocal intimacy into a mode of public address, connecting speakers and listeners, not by the rationality of discourse, but by the kind of mutual indifference that is simultaneously like stalking and like talking to oneself. Self-care and the possibility of a more soulful life are associated with the capacity of one to search for what they need and to engage in the solitary reward of their findings. Hundreds of books are released every year to tell us how to have a better life, putting that mission on the shoulder of the individual. As Chris Cohen argues, in the Anglo-American context directed by dominant neoliberalism, attention of the late has been directed at the subject addressed as an individual. But unlike the accessible individual of the mass society, so easily subsumed in the single-minded group, neoliberal rhetorics and policy envision individual as entrepreneur, free agent of the marketplace, and almost infinitely diverse. This turns toward personalized attention in ASMR triggered video, I argue, limits the imaginary of encounter to strict genre that prevents the surprising discovery of new sensation, and it redefines the limit of when and how sensation can generate sociality. I want to end this presentation by something that recently happened during a little something that is called the Super Bowl. A lot of people sent me that video and were really excited, and I have to say that I was really excited too because it stars Zoe Kravitz selling us beer using methods that, like some of the techniques of ASMR. I'm gonna show it because.
Let's all experience something together. This place, so pure you can pure gold. Beer in its organic form.
All right, so in this presentation, I've looked at sensation as side of aesthetically mediated encounters and as event capable of conceiving and imagining relations. But I tried to pay attention to the particularity and the strategies around ASMR's dissemination on the web. I adduced that ASMR videos here are as exemplary not only because they are sensation that have been defined and disseminated employing web strategies, but also because they embody the logic of distributed affective networks, perfectly overlapping data production, group production, surfing, connecting, networking, and creating populations. So thank you very much.
So up next we have Anna Pendergrast, and she's going to continue exploring more YouTube phenomenons. She is a New Zealand-based analyst and writer. She is the co-lead of Antistatic, a communication and research group that investigates and translates complex issues in tech, the environment, and social justice. Her recent writing focuses on the visual culture of internet, digital equity, and cyborg labor.
Thanks. Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Anna, and today I'll be talking about YouTube videos, specifically fix-it videos. While these don't rack up the views to rival Baby Shark or PewDiePie, they're still popular and handy if you need to fix your smartphone screen or your washing machine stops going. I'll argue that these videos, in the aggregate, open up space for critique and a reimagining of our disposable material culture. We live in a throwaway area. It's easier to buy a new $8 toaster at Walmart than it is to fix your old one. If you want to replace your smartphone screen, I hope you have a hairdryer handy to loosen and soften the glue before you pry it off with special tools. Want to fix your washing machine? Great. If you want to replace the bearings, you'll have to dismantle it completely first and even break some parts. None of this is an accident. The neoliberal economic model is finely tuned to ensure that we consume as much as possible. Many appliances, digital devices, and other household items are designed to be hard to fix and only last for so long. For many digital devices, this is about 18 months. This is planned obsolescence, and it rears its head in a number of ways, including making things using cheap materials and hasty construction so they don't last, making replacement parts hard to find, so pricey you may as well replace the whole thing, using copyright law to protect digital systems so repair and upgrade options are expensive and restricted, dropping ongoing support for software, limiting the usability of technologies that run it, and finally, preventing repair and even recycling, using what I call obstructive design. This includes gluing or welding things shut, using many different kinds of bespoke screw on one item, or changing core components from model to model. I did a hasty collection of anecdata from friends in the lead up to today and found that toilet seats, gearboxes, headphones, and printers are all among the items that are much cheaper or easier to repair than they are just to replace than they are to repair. And I imagine this is just the tip of the iceberg. The current linear system, take, make, waste, as the circular economy folks call it, it's not sustainable. Organizations like the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the Cradle to Cradle Product Innovation Institute, and the United Nations E-Waste Coalition are all making efforts to enable a transition towards a circular economy. That is, where materials and components are kept in use for as long as possible and waste is designed out of the system. This includes designing products for durability, repair, upgrades, reuse, and eventually recycling of their components. To make a change in our system, consumers will also need to act by changing their habits and applying pressure to corporations and governments. While adapting consumption patterns on an individual level can seem ineffective, if done en masse, it can slow down the cycle of production. So, how can fix-it videos help? The scale of the problem is huge, but our view is very narrow. Most of the time as consumers, we only see a really small part of this complex system of production and waste disposal. When our products become broken or unusable for whatever reason, there's a small window when we have to think about what to do with it. Once you put something in the trash or recycling, return it to the supplier or donate it to Goodwill, you don't actually need to think about what happens next. Out of sight, out of mind. And when products are cheap, getting rid of them is often the path of least resistance. But it's this moment of resistance that I'm most interested in. For those who do pause and consider, can I fix this myself? The thriving category of YouTube fix-it videos can crack open a window through which to imagine a different, less alienated, less extractive world. And here I'm speaking from experience. A few months ago, my washing machine broke. I was told by the repair guy that the bearings were shot and it wasn't worth trying to fix. But instead of sending it straight to landfill, a friend and I took to YouTube to see if we could try our hand at fixing it. The biggest cost seemed to be labor, and we had time. A video from Matt, who works at a UK spare parts business, became our guide, and we got cracking. He said at the beginning, this is a big job, not for the faint-hearted. He was correct. It took us about 8 hours to take everything apart. And spoiler alert, our story does not have a happy ending. We got to the mill and it was way more broken than we had thought. So it went to the landfill after all. But what I did get out of the experience is a sense of great anger and of revolutionary potential. And this was just kind of the beginning of our journey. So maybe others can have that feeling too. There are a lot of varied videos that fall into the fix-it genre. Search for how to fix, followed by any household item you can think of, will mostly likely throw up some results. But if you search something like iPhone, you're going to get heaps and heaps, with lots of the videos having millions of views. So what are these videos actually like, and who makes them? Unsurprisingly, the form of videos vary depending on what is being fixed. So if you're having a digital device being fixed, or headphones, it's usually a fairly close-up shot, shot from above with annotations popping up or a voiceover, sometimes with really horrific music as well, and lots of comments below to highlight that. Large appliance repair videos are a little bit trickier, and sometimes you'll get weird shots of people shining a torch into the machine and other creative ways of making. What about the creators? Well, first up, it has to be noted that there's not a lot of diversity. Most of these people are white men, which is super problematic, and unfortunately I didn't get to delve into that too much, but another paper for another time. Some creators had channels that focus on a particular type of repair, so just doing digital devices or furniture or appliances. And I found that with appliance video repairs, it was usually businesses rather than individuals that were getting in there and showing people what to do. You can also see videos popping up from creators with a wider scope of interest, so DIY people once do house painting one day and then a repair video the next. And one of the biggest viewed videos for a washing machine repair was a guy that usually fixes cars and had over 4 million subscribers. The common thread in all the videos is that they're very practical and aimed at actually giving people the best chance of extending an item's lifespan. It's clear from the overall aesthetics of the videos that they're not about performance so much and more about giving actual practical advice. I think this blurb from the About page of one of the creators, Richard Lloyd, sums it up nicely. My goal is to help people whenever I can, in whatever way I can. I will post a video on anything I think will add value to your life. I love to share my knowledge. I am a jack of all trades and a master of some. So we've looked at the creators of the video. What about the people watching them? Is this just another form of entertainment to binge watch, or a knowledge transfer system that actually helps people in the real world? I immerse myself in some of the comment sections for videos on washing machines, smartphones, headphones, toasters, to see if they had some common themes emerge. And emerge they did, along with the general thank yous, messages of appreciation, and the odd mansplainer. Everyone's got better advice, I think, and they think at least, they've always got something to say. But the recurring themes include people sharing their own experiences of how to fix things, both successful and totally unsuccessful, people realizing that it's often cheaper or easier to get a new item and reminiscing about the good old days when things were made to last, and people asking for further advice and usually getting it. Overall, what I found was a bunch of people trying to learn something new about the inner workings of the objects that populate their homes and being pretty pumped about the experience. So what are the key takeaways here? First, and probably most importantly, is that this haphazard collection of videos could have the power to make a big change in the world. We know that millions of people are watching, many with the intention to try their hand at fixing something on their own. When you're empowered to fix something, you might try that more often and think twice when it comes to getting rid of your things. For people who realize that it's not worth fixing something due to poor construction or, say, way too much glue, that's looking at you, Apple AirPods. Hopefully that'll cause anger, lead people to pressure corporations to do better and governments to use the tools at their disposal to enable systems change. The final takeaway is that the medium of video, coupled with platforms like YouTube, are powerful tools that can enable knowledge transfer at a huge scale. Passing on repair and fix-it skills from one person to another is nothing new, but now this can happen on a scale that isn't possible with in-person classes or one-on-one instruction. The ubiquity of affordable smartphones with decent cameras also means that there are many millions of people who have the tools they need to produce and consume knowledge without traditional gatekeepers or high production costs. So to recap, we're consuming at an unsustainable rate. YouTube videos and their creators are teaching people to extend the life of their stuff and sometimes unknowingly giving people a glimpse into a previously hidden system of production at the same time. Thanks.
Awesome. So I'm just going to invite all three of you to come back up here, and we're going to open the floor for Q&As. You can move them a little bit this way so the camera can. Yeah, so does anyone want to have the first question? Yeah.
So this question is for Anna, and I'm wondering, in your research of these videos, did you come across sort of anything that might hint at what I suspect is underlying this, which is something of a kind of a classist economy as well? Because I would imagine, you know, there's a facility to replacing items, but it's also not accessible to everyone in the same way. It's financially limiting. And then the fact that you showed that screenshot of there's a lot of people searching for it, I'm wondering if kind of there's a demand, but maybe not enough supply. So, I mean, I clearly just started thinking about this, so I'm wondering what you came across in your research and what you think about it.
Yes, so I think there's definitely supply. So people do make videos about anything that you could possibly think of being fixed, but I think class definitely comes into it in a couple of ways. First of all, often when you're buying something at the beginning, if you don't have money, you're going to buy something that you can afford, and often those things are the things that are going to break quickly. And if you don't have time, then replacing it, you know, trying to fix your washing machine if you don't have hours, like that's ridiculous for most people. So I had the privilege of time to even try that out. So I think that in even trying to fix something yourself, you need a lot of time. So it's not doable for everyone, but some of these things are pretty quick fixes. So I think there is, and it is enough supply. People are looking for it, but there's definitely, this is only accessible to some people. Like you often need quite weird tools as well that I never really thought of. So for smartphones, you need a special set of things to pry, like looks like guitar picks to pry things off and various bits and pieces. So a lot of stuff I wouldn't even bother trying, especially electronics. So yeah, there's definitely a balance.
So it creates a vicious circle of like buy cheap, breaks. You're not going to repair, so you buy cheap again, and then again and again and again and again.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
Hi, great talks, everyone. This is for Patricia. I'm just curious about your thoughts of the ASMR Super Bowl commercial and the kind of capitalistic takeover of that community, and just kind of your thoughts on that.
It had been a lot of like magazine had been using ASMR with like stars when they were promoting their movies. So there's been a lot happening recently with that community. But I think that what is specific to the Super Bowl commercial is that it sells a beer, and it kind of like displaces the kind of site that was like all of the ASMR videos are made in bedrooms, and some of the people, the producer that make them, do receive products to star in their video, but that was like specifically kind of like making a like nature versus culture kind of dialogue too in the video. So it's kind of interesting that the reversal that is happening in that video is to sell the purity of a drink and to sell an object, but still making it really feminized. Like the possibility of purity in nature is feminized, and it's like a whispery feminization, like it's a soft feminization of of what they're selling. So I thought it was interesting too. I didn't see it live, but like everybody kept sending me the video because I like ASMR and I like Zoe Kravitz. So it was a perfect. It was like I've made my research is right there. Congruent.
Like an outcry in the ASMR community about it or against it?
No. I think people were pretty happy. Usually, I mean, there's now the community is kind of like transforming it. Like they do a lot of the people, the first producers that started the community are now producing like howling videos where they go like shopping and they're on field. So there's a lot of like transformation and a lot of blurring of the lines. Like there's no pure ASMR playlist anymore. Like everybody's kind of doing a little bit of everything to maybe finance themselves. So I think that, yeah.
Talking about community and the finance that you touch on, in Carmen's presentation, you mentioned that queer female create themselves as a commodity for capitalist capture. This could apply for all of you, right? So we have content, and then we have an audience, and then that audience is not being targeted, so people come and start creating content for that audience, which could be misrepresented depending on who's creating it, or it's a perfect representation. So can you tell me a little bit, or like all of you, can you share a little bit about how the community, the reason that this is being created is because of the need of the community, and how each community is being represented? You spoke a little bit about it, but if there's anything else you want to add, or if any of you want to add something on that.
Yeah, I think that it's like it's deeply material. Like the issue is the platform, firstly. So because it's that information is there, and so the community becomes turned into a commodity because the infrastructure of YouTube allows for that to happen, right? And then the other issue is that we're talking about it's a deeply material issue, right? So you're just talking about ASMR artists, and like they're gonna take the partnership with Blue Apron or something and do a video about that. I watch a lot of ASMR. And they're going to do that because Blue Apron's going to give them whatever amount of money to do that. And so then we start, talking about like, in early days of YouTube, we remember it used to be like, oh, this person does a partnership, so there's some kind of like capitalist sellout. And that conversation actually doesn't happen as much anymore. Like it's really shifted a lot, and in the ASMR community as well. For queer female fandom, I would say, what I find super interesting is because it's slightly different because we're talking about a marginalized group of people that often don't have access, to varying extents, don't have access to material resources, right? So that becomes like a way to be able to be normalized. But I would say if we want to talk about like what resistance is, I would say the sort of like subtextual readings that we see with like the Xena fandom, where it's not just like a main text representation, but them taking an object that media producers did not intend to be used that way. Or a lot of it happens around Supernatural too, and like pairing those two. I don't watch it, but the two people, it's like a huge one, right? So that being taken and then made into something that's just for that community is like more resistant than calling for more mainstream representation, in my opinion. Yeah.
I feel like I've forgotten the original question now, but I like you.
Just like, for example, in your case, you spoke about more of the service part and the purpose-sided service for people that are like trying to look for a quick solution. But you also mentioned that there's a lot of companies that are showing this video. So do you feel like these companies and these individuals, maybe they're not interested in sharing the knowledge, they're just interested in the monetization of these videos?
Absolutely. I think there's a balance there. When I first kind of dived into the videos, I kind of assumed that there'd be more random people on the internet fixing things, which there definitely are. There are people that just have 1 or 2 videos on their YouTube channel with heaps and heaps of views and don't have any information about them, and it's fixing one particular thing. But then you also have the appliance repair people, and that seems to be a really big thing. And I heard recently of someone that, did try and fix something and then bought their spare part. So I feel like it does probably work for them as a commercial model, and as opposed to having some kind of partnership, as you were talking about, it works for them as advertising. So which is great and a good service for the people that are using it. But the rest of people are not so much monetized. There are maybe about half have ads or probably making some kind of income. The rest just seem to be doing it out of the goodness of their heart. So I'm not sure if it's going to be sustainable in the long term, for assuming that people can get all of this knowledge. And we see with things like cooking shows, people are getting more performative in their kind of approach, and then getting more partnerships and things, which is great because it's super entertaining. But in terms of actually giving that practical advice, it's not so useful. You get hours and hours of labor put into 10 minutes, so you don't actually get to see what's happening. So my hope is that that doesn't happen so much, but in terms of the producers, they need to get paid somehow probably. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, so one thing I think is really interesting is a lot of the presentations looking at this idea of sharing and the media object sort of becoming greater than itself through this process of wikiization, right? Whether it's a media show that the queer fans, write this whole contextual body around, or maybe whether it's a DIY video where there's life of an object and we recontextualize it digitally to extend the life of the object. And so I'm wondering, given that a lot of the times this happens on YouTube or on these platforms that are algorithmically based, to your point around sort of this endpoint of capitalist consumption, is the solution to get off YouTube? Is the solution to create like new spaces where that algorithm might not be prioritizing that function, right, of turning profit into shareholder value? Or can YouTube still be taken back and reused in a way to still do this and have that advocacy?
And I guess that will bring up the spaces like Patreon where you like pay for a subscription and yeah.
I think that for Fix-It videos is quite different from other things, because people are specifically looking for a very specific thing, and usually the algorithm will throw up something. It will prioritize certain types at the top, but you'll eventually probably find something. And I think I have been thinking about this a lot, and I think for YouTube Fix-It videos, YouTube's kind of fine. That it's not ideal. Google, like reading about their kind of marketing tactics for Google, it's pretty terrible in terms of encouraging people to make their own ads that really blend into the next video that's going to come along. So it's really how you can possibly get the most money for Google's advertisers rather than the producers. So I think it's kind of not ideal, but I think it works for people accessing the knowledge. And I wonder that if we go somewhere else, if there's not enough people, then that kind of really large-scale information exchange can't happen so much. So I think it's not ideal, but it probably works pretty well for this particular kind of video.
Yeah, I think that my problem with the algorithmic capitalism is more that the blurring of the rules that are entrenched in those in algorithms. So I think that YouTube as a platform isn't bad in itself, but we need to kind of put forward the mechanism that are at play. So most people don't know that it is actually a person who deletes posts on YouTube that are, of situations that you wouldn't want to see, or that the platform judges that are not allowable in the platform, and even those kind of regulations are not made known to people unless you search on YouTube to see what is allowed and what isn't allowed on the platform. So it becomes kind of all hidden, and what you can actually do often falls back to either someone's discretion, one of the content moderator that would delete it without knowing, and as I mentioned, bodies of color are perceived as more sexual, so a lot of them get deleted because someone decided that this is the kind of the society that we live in has this preconception, and the same for algorithm. If we kind of knew what were the mathematic behind them, and that we knew how it worked, maybe we would be able to kind of have a more it would be more understanding to know what we get into when we search for these things. And mine is kind of, it's sensation, and it's a made-up community in a way, so it's less problematic. But when you start going into communities of people who are marginalized, and those algorithms are really problematic.
Yeah. I guess I would add it's just so much. I think awareness is a big part of that, of what's happening on these spaces, that we're starting to have these conversations. It's awesome. In terms of queer female fandom, that space would be Twitter more than YouTube. Where we're seeing this sort of queer female fandom creates all of this material. They create this barrier gaze trope. They do all this labor, and then, Jason Rothenberg sees that and then is like, okay, well, we'll have a queer relationship on this. Like, it's called queer baiting, if you've heard that term, which is just sort of like, like you see this audience and then you just sort of like market towards them because they're becoming big enough now that becomes plausible to do. But what we're seeing is a very intense portability of language where terms like community just transfer over and get used to sort of hide the fact that what's happening beneath all of this, community and work and stuff is that a few people are making a ton of money. So when we talk about whether these actions, these coordinated efforts of tons of people, if they're doing work to work against heteronormative structures and marginalizing and reductionist structures, we need to have a very deeper conversation about that includes things like visibility and algorithms and what is capturable. And Dean's term of communicative capitalism is really, really helpful here because she's talking about we're doing all of these things, we're meeting people, we're reaching out, we're finding help through the internet, and that's ending our alienation ostensibly, but is it? Because the deepest and largest reductionist force on the planet is capitalism. So if we don't start using those spaces to call out those sites and to call out the structures, right, and say, no, it sucks that Charlie Brooker made $1 million off this. It sucks that Netflix made billions of dollars off of this concept. Then what are we doing?
Hello. I have a question for Patricia about ASMR. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about self-care and ASMR because I don't really watch those videos, but my friends who do oftentimes just say that they help them fall asleep. So I was wondering if if you've noticed that a lot of people use those videos to kind of relax and be able to fall asleep and yeah.
Form of meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that a lot of these videos are created with that in mind. I watch some sometimes to fall asleep, not the ones where people talk, but some are of Zen gardens, so you hear the sound of it and then it blurs out. But I think that, and that's great, and I think that at the beginning, even with the Yahoo group, people were sharing some soft, some whispery video along for the same reasons. What I think that the kind of the tension that I'm noticing with the self-care is that there is a big dismantling of the public space and of the public healthcare system, and by using these videos instead and making these videos, and now they're becoming more and more popular, just like self-help books, it kind of puts the pressure on the individual to be like, oh, I have problems sleeping, I don't have anywhere else to go, I cannot go see the doctor, I cannot go to a clinic. Then those videos kind of become part of kind of a circular notion of the individual can do it himself. The public doesn't there shouldn't be any kind of public funding for that. And I mean, it's kind of a reach, but I think that it's part of a lot of what has been written about self-care book and self-help book is about this kind of democratization of all of the resources that we have, and how these kind of unique objects like ASMR, these books are kind of part of it because they allow one to think, well, I'll be okay if I just buy these 20 books. I'll be okay if I just go to sleep listening to ASMR because that's kind of the only thing that people have in some cases.
I have a question for Anna. So that there used to be this thing called IKEA hacks, which was described how you could use IKEA products to make something cool and new, and then I think it got shut down by IKEA. I was wondering with your thing, there's the planned obsolescence, if there are any channels that have been shut down by companies because they don't want people learning how to fix their products.
Not that I know of. I know that there are definitely people, so I don't know if you've heard of iFixit, which is has a great website and a bunch of videos about pulling particular things apart. So it pulls apart AirPods or every new technology thing and gives it a rating. And I know that I wouldn't say controversial, but for companies, they're really damning and showing that these products are terribly made with tons of glue, can't be recycled. So I think that kind of thing is going to be very interesting to watch to see if there's some kind of pushback on that, but I haven't seen in terms of the repair. All of the videos I've seen, so the washing machine one, which this machine that I fixed was definitely not made to repair. It was purposely clipped together, so you'd have to break it apart. The repairman was just very matter of fact about it. So I think a lot of these videos in which you're fixing something that's not made to be fixed kind of has this veneer of not doing anything revolutionary or interesting. So I think it's flying under the radar at the moment. So that's super interesting about the IKEA hacks, and hopefully it won't happen to other things.
I'll take you, and then I'll take you.
I have a question for Patricia. I was interested to see, I didn't know anything about the history of ASMR, but I was interested to see that on the Yahoo groups, it seemed like more of a community that was kind of congealing around this diagnostic thing, so people realizing that there was this phenomenon, and it seems more in line with a lot of the like online healthcare communities where people are maybe doing community research about like underserved diseases and things like that. So I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about that, and then maybe how those users felt in the transition from this like diagnostic community to like a kind of a, consumptive community where you're just watching, products that are produced for you on YouTube.
I didn't really, that's not like a really focus of my research, but I've noticed that a lot of the people who were using the Yahoo groups were much older in their descriptions. So I think that maybe there wasn't such a big tension when the community kind of shifted towards YouTube, because that community is from username, from what I can kind of see from the username, and some of them have like birth dates that are like, I don't know they seem much younger. So I think that maybe like the purpose of the group on the Yahoo group and the people that were finding it, that was like 10 years ago. So I think it was much more different than what people are looking for when they're looking at the ASMR community on YouTube. So I don't know if there's much of a shift, like of some of the community members from one to the other. I think that during the 2010s, when people started like posting videos on YouTube, there was a lot of crossover, but I think that it died down, and now it kind of became kind of another community, but I'm not too sure because I didn't really kind of follow on the users. But yeah, I think it's an interesting question. Yeah.
So my question is for you two, although feel free to chime in as well. You read a lot about, or at least I do, about YouTube as a locus of misinformation, of radicalization, and just more generally about how much people, especially older people and less online people, really underestimate and misunderstand the importance of YouTube as a social factor. So I guess my question is, through the process of your research, were there any kind of general conclusions that you were able to draw about YouTube as a social force, the future of it, or just things that you want people to know that you think are important to know about YouTube in general?
Good question. So at the time of making this presentation, I'm from New Zealand, and as you probably know, there was a horrific terrorist attack at the mosque probably a month ago now. And at the same time, a huge discussion in New Zealand and more broadly about regulation on YouTube came up. So there was this very weird tension about me looking at this very specific, relatively upbeat part of the internet, and at the same time, this platform was being used to share these horrific videos. And so I think that out my particular scope around the fix-it videos, and I think is not that interesting in a way. It's super interesting, but not in terms of the whole platform and how it can be used in many ways. I think that if you're an older person or anyone on the internet that knows how to use YouTube can find a fix-it video. But in terms of misinformation and accessing content that's objectionable, I think that there needs to be a whole lot more kind of understanding of skills and knowledge and trust that need to be built up kind of across society. I think that often people will just assume that having a device and an internet connection is enough to be kind of digitally included, but it's not. So I think that building up skills, getting proper regulation in place, and then there's going to be a really tight balance, I think, if regulation of content is going to come into play, because no one's going to be happy with whatever the outcome is. So I think looking at regulation, figuring out how people can trust the platform, and looking at the capitalist structure is definitely going to be in there too, are kind of the things that we can look at. That was a bit rambly, sorry.
Yeah, so over the last week, I've been kind of working on this presentation, and I see that all of the videos that are recommended to me are heavily linked to ASMR or self-help or self-care, and I think that it becomes like so easy to see how this kind of radicalization can happen on a platform that just kind of doesn't try to, like, algorithmically is created to kind of just power you through and get more and more and more and more and more money from your clicks, and because of some regulations that have happened, because of horrible events that have happened because of YouTube, I think that I don't know if that's kind of the way to go. Like I don't really like the idea that anytime something bad happened, we add new regulation, because then things are always going to happen and we're always going to be acting against those rather than before those. So I don't really know if if I see any kind of radical potential in how we can change the platform, but I'm hoping that people who are much more, who work much more with these ideas could actually do something. But at the moment, it's just like so easy to see the kind of connection, and someone who doesn't really understand the internet or doesn't have the interest in kind of learning how these platforms are created will automatically get access to the kind of small point of view that they have. So.
And Carmen, I guess you can't speak on YouTube, but you could potentially speak on the same question, but in traditional media form. So, like Netflix or Hulu or anything like that, and the same question of the creation of the content because something happened. So let's say they put up a show and queer female representation is awful, so then someone else comes in and takes that opportunity to like fix what the other person did and get money out of that. Maybe you can speak a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, of course, I mean, the first thing we need to talk about is that it's like what gets to count as queer female representation is already a very sort of like heteronormative version of what gay looks like, right? What gay women look like. And it's the kind of lesbian porn that you're picturing. Like, right? It's for consumption. Like, it's what men are okay with seeing. So it's actually kind of a patriarchal form of like queer that we're being access to, that we're being told is like enough for queer representation and counts as like LGBT community. But like, what is that community really, if not just a moniker, if not just a term that is kind of useful in order to like have some kind of traction in the world and be able to like rent an apartment with your girlfriend, right? So, but like, it doesn't end there. Like, it can't end there. I don't know. I guess I think that we focus a lot on platforms and like what's happening here, but there's like deeply systemic issues. And Patricia, you were like you were talking about, you said maybe this is a leap. I don't think it's a leap to say that like, and yours is about this too, right? Like it's a deep individualization, right? Where it's like, figure it out for yourself. Help yourself, like figure it out, find a space for yourself, versus like, okay, but these are stemming from like deeply material problems where people can't pay their rent because they have to work 10 jobs to pay their rent and they don't have time to fix their objects. And they can't fall asleep at night. So if we keep talking about the platform as though the platform is the problem, we forget about the hardware and the hard issues of society that are underlying all of that, and that we're kind of pretending aren't part of it, which, as I said in my talk, kind of treats capitalism, or like the capital version of the internet or of technology, that is somehow become mundane or banal, right? It's not the thing that like we should be talking about somehow, even though it is. Like, we have so much technological potential that we could use to fix all of these huge social issues, but we don't because they're not helpful for capitalism. So that's what ends up happening.
I guess we have time for one more question. Rita.
So, since we're already kind of on the topic, I'm curious about all of your opinions on democratization and how, it's interesting. We had Hulu and Netflix come up, and the thought immediately popped into my head that one of the reasons we don't talk about them and radicalization is because actually it's quite controlled. There's huge gatekeeping in terms of who gets to put content on them. And YouTube gets marketed as this democratization tool, but at the same time, now we have these kind of counter-democratic forces, etc. So I'm just curious, in all of your studies, what you've come across and what you're thinking.
I don't have anything off the top of my head.
In another part of my research, I'm looking at internet infrastructures and how these big companies are the ones that are kind of dictating what gets built in other countries. So you get someone like Netflix, let's say, who decides what country will be included in the Netflix nation, and then these countries kind of have to create those infrastructure without any money from Netflix, so that the people living there, the consumer for Netflix, but the citizen for the country, kind of have access, and it kind of becomes this kind of morbid kind of thing where Netflix gets all the money from the consumer, and the country are left with creating these infrastructures. Sometimes really quickly they will fall out, they will break eventually, but they keep having to do it. And even though a lot of researchers have worked on the fact that videos, internet video infrastructure will reach its limit pretty soon, because there's no, the cables are never going to be able to sustain the kind of data transfer that they have. So these kinds of company are kind of just seeing the most money that they can in the fastest way, but then it leaves this kind of charge or this kind of weight onto all of the smaller nations and smaller countries to kind of have to continue to build up onto it, and then doesn't leave space for them to kind of create their own Netflix or create something that will counter this kind of cultural imperialism. So
Thank
this
you.
is where.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but feel free to, approach them in the break session and join any of the other sessions and keep on learning. Thank you, guys.